Hello everyone. Have you ever tried to create a procedural generation floating island for a game? It's no easy task, and there are many different techniques to achieve the desired result. Some examples of these techniques include using height maps, noise functions, or even manually sculpting the landscape. However, in this video, we're going to explore a new solution from Unreal Engine 5.2 that uses Procedural Content Generation, PCG, and combines it with Spline data to create some nice randomized islands. The new PCG solution from Unreal Engine 5.2 allows us to create floating islands with ease. By using Spline data to define the shape of the island and applying PCG algorithms to generate the landscape, we can quickly and easily create randomized islands that look great in our games. Now let's dive into the details of how I created a PCG floating island in Unreal Engine 5.2. Starting with the blueprint. The blueprint is created using two splines, one for creating the island and the second for removing parts along the spline. Let's take a look at the procedural content generation. First, we'll create a flat floor using boxes with a grass material. Then we'll add some foliage layers to create a more realistic environment. The first foliage layer is called Flowers and Mushrooms, and adds some nice details to the landscape. The second layer is Bushes, which adds some larger vegetation to the island. The third layer is Trees, which adds some larger trees to the landscape. The fourth layer is Scattered Grass, which adds some smaller grassy areas in the island. Finally, the fifth layer is Grass, which adds grass to every floor box. Next, we'll add an outside floor layer to create a boundary around the island. This layer is made up of flat boxes with grass and dirt materials. On top of this layer, we'll add two more foliage layers. The first is Rocks. The second is Flowers, which adds some flowers to the side of the island. After that, we'll create an outside rocks layer using random meshes from a collection with textures of rocks. This layer creates a sort of fence around the island. Now that we've added the fence to the perimeter of our floating island, let's take a moment to see what we've accomplished so far. I'll hit the play button in the editor to show you how the landscape looks in-game. As you can see, the procedural generation tools in Unreal Engine 5.2 have allowed us to create a vast and diverse floating island that is both beautiful and functional. With the added layers of foliage and rock formations, the island truly comes to life with a sense of realism and natural beauty. Below the fence, we'll add a rocky layer made up of random meshes with textures of different types of rocks. This layer adds more height and variety to the landscape. Underneath the rocky layer, we'll add a second rocky layer to create even more height and variety. Below that, we'll add a bottom layer made up of random meshes with textures of rocks. The bottom layer has two sublayers, one for the largest rock at the end of the island, and one for small rocks floating a bit below the island. On top of the rocky layer, we'll add a rocky ring layer, which is made up of smaller meshes and creates a ring around the island, adding more variety and width to the landscape. Finally, we'll add a floating rocks layer made up of randomized rocks floating above the island. We'll also use the second spline data to extract and remove everything that the spline comes across, creating holes or tunnels in the landscape. With the new procedural content generation solution, we can create stunning and customable floating islands with ease. Now that we have completed all of the layers, let's take a closer look at how we can easily customize the island using the splines. By simply adjusting the spline data, we can create different shapes and sizes of floating islands to create unique and varied landscapes. With the power of Unreal Engine 5.2's procedural generation tools, the possibilities are endless, and you can let your creativity run wild. So don't be afraid to experiment and see what kind of incredible floating islands you can create with this amazing technology. Now that we've created our procedural content generation floating island in Unreal Engine 5.2, let's take a look at the final result in a small cinematic. Thanks for hanging out with me today and learning about the awesome power of procedural generation. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more videos on game development and cutting-edge technology. And until next time, keep creating and have fun.